Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Sellik the Thunder podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Fitzsimons, and today we've shuffled it up once again. It's nice to see some of the regular faces, but we're here to talk about everything that's happened in the past week or so with Celtic Football Club. Of course, last week's episode was a bit demoralising. Ryan, you were here for that, as we covered Celtic losing the league title officially. So we're back this week with a weekend. There's actually no Celtic games to talk about, so in a sense, this could be the most positive episode yet, mate.
It could be, mate. I wasn't on last week. It was Keane.
Oh, was it? I thought, oh, there you go. That's the 21st for you. Sit by the way.
Sorry, I couldn't sit and take the credit, man, because it was a great episode last week. But no, I've had a week to think about things, and I'm ready for this. So.
Try and be a wee bit level-headed, consider the emotions
absolutely.
that's ran through us. Aye, and Cal, that's actually then that makes sense. So it's actually two completely different people now. Like, this is what I mean. Too many drinks through the week now to celebrate the birthday, Cal. It's nice to have, we've all had a drink. Cal, it's been a few weeks since you've been last on, mate. How are you feeling?
Not too bad. I've kind of thankful I wasn't on last week. I think I did one too many bad things to be saying, so it's good to be back now.
Well, we're going to start halfway bad things probably, even though I gave us the fact that it could be the most positive episode yet with no game on. Celtic still find a way, maybe not inexplicably them, but they still find a way to make you talk about some negatives in football. So let's start off with, let me just set the tone for the episode. We're going to be sitting talking about mostly the direction of the club over the next few weeks, perhaps who's going to be the new manager. We'll have a little bit of insight on the derby next week, I imagine, as well. We'll look at the Twitter questions and see where we are come the end of all that. But we may as well start with the managerial conversation because names are starting to fly out willy-nilly. It's been a week that has seen, you know, this guy, that guy, all linked to the job. Let's start with the most recent one. I think one that would invoke the most conversation in the comments below. Let's start with none other than the man himself, Mr. Roy Keane. We're just talking about the headline from that 3-letter publication earlier on before we started the show. They put it as Roy Keane, K-E-E-N. Apparently, he is keen in taking the manager's role here at Celtic. There's not much substance to it, I imagine. I don't know, you know, the chances of that happening, but Ryan, I'll let you kick us off, mate. Roy Keane to Celtic.
This is like the transfer rumour of chlamydia. It keeps on coming back.
Are you hiding something? Are you hiding something, Ryan?
No. I get checked out years ago. No.
Brilliant start.
No, it just keeps on coming back. It's just so boring. This sort of this rumour keeps on coming back every sort of couple of years when we're on the hunt for a new manager. He's not managed in 10 years in terms of like a managerial role. I know he's had assistant managers roles, but he's not a manager. This is just putting two and two together. And no, I'm not a fan of it at all. It would be a worse appointment than Lennon, in my opinion.
You think so? As much as that? To be honest, I'll come into my opinion in a moment. Callum, of course, Roy Keane, ties with Celtic, played for us in the past, the end of his career at Celtic. In fact, went on to, as you've said, assistant managed to none other than Mark O'Neill, another big Celtic link there. And of course, being Irish, it kind of gets the blood flowing for a lot of folk. Roy Keane is somebody whose name does pop up every time this situation rises. It's kind of like that way Owen Coyle used to be for me. You know, Owen Coyle was always Owen Coyle, Celtic manager. Roy Keane for the last few has been there. Just the same question I asked to Ryan. For you, what kind of appointment would that be? I don't think it will happen, right? But what is your thoughts towards the rumours? Is it simply just one of those ones now, it's clutching at straws because of the ties he's had with Celtic in the past?
I think that's exactly what it is. I think it's one of those ones, as Ryan said, it's like the chlamydia in the transfer market. It just keeps coming round and round. For me, it's essentially just as much as keeping John Kennedy in the role. I know two very different people, but neither would do just as much for me. But it can't, if it ended up him, I would be baffled. It's just not the right appointment at all.
No, it's not at all. It's like one of those ones now that we were kind of striving for change here now. We've had that. I feel like you're just getting almost close to, as you said, you think worse, Ryan, but you're getting close to, if not the exact same thing as Neil Lennon. You're getting this sort of old pals act. You know, apparently is good mates with Dermot Desmond. You're getting a character, which was Neil Lennon, perhaps a character that's just more, it's more for the camaraderie than the best of the team. Ryan, for as much as he speaks in the media and as much as a character he is, and we all love him, I think we can all admit, we all enjoy listening to Roy Keane. I think on Sky Sports he's the highlight of the day, but I mean, what would that even point towards for Celtic if he was appointed manager?
I think it would be a complete dereliction of duty from the board, if I'm being perfectly honest. I think their job is to do a thorough interview process, because they didn't do that last time with Lennon. They didn't do an interview process. They just gave Lennon the job. They said they had loads of CVs that they just put away because Lennon knew the city, he knew the team and all that. I've fed up of saying that.
We've heard it all, haven't we?
it just totally ruined everything. All the good work that was done by Rodgers previously. But no, we need to go through a thorough interview process, and then the best manager needs to be found, or the best candidate needs to be found. And it would be obvious if you were to do interviews that Roy Keane wouldn't be the man if you do a proper interview, because he doesn't fit into the role. I think he's outdated in some of his views as well. I mean, you think of some of the players that he could fall out with in that Celtic team, it would just be a disaster. You see Rangers fans on the comments below that tweet of the news break, and they were all celebrating. It was the same celebrations that came when Lennon was announced. We don't want that. We want them to be scared and intimidated of us again, and that won't work.
Yep, exactly. You line him up against this, so I'm going to come at you, Cammy. How in the right mind can anybody in charge of this decision-making process, whether it be Dermot Desmond, whether it be Dominic Mackay, when you look at Roy Keane and then you line him up beside some of the more serious candidates for this job, and one will come on to, who I'm not keen on, but even if you line him up beside a certain somebody will come on to next, right? But you line him up beside the likes of your Eddie Howe's, you line him up beside, even if it was the likes of Steve Clark and Rafa Benitez, and even now Enzo Maresca, Roberto Martinez, and I'm not saying any of these guys are going to get the job, some are way more realistic than others, but you line up Roy Keane beside all of them, and how in any way could the Celtic board justify giving him the job, Cal?
I think the only way they'd be able to try and decide that would need to be after a night in the booze and a hefty hangover and thought, let's get this done. We just bring him in. He'll do all.
It's like a good laugh has led to something a lot more serious the next morning. You're waking up like, whoa.
It's one of the ones, oh boys, maybe we should book that. And it gets closer. I'm like, why did we do that? Genuinely, I'd end up wanting him. We'd hit December, but like, why the fuck did we bring him in? What has he actually done? For me, he would do hee-haw.
Do you understand though the point that, and this is me just playing devil's advocate for it, because I cannot stress enough that I do not want Roy Keane. I want him nowhere near the Celtic job. If it was up to me, he'd be the last one on the list of the names I've seen so far. Certainly one of the last names anyway. Can you understand to any extent, as a devil's advocate here, the positives that some people see in Roy Keane? Now, I've had a lot of people comment on the videos and comment on the podcasts and tweeting me and all the rest of it, saying Roy Keane would be good because of this authoritarian kind of leadership and the way he would get players in order, stamping out silliness from the club. Can you understand any of that, or is that just a kind of pipe dream from the person that you see represented on the television sort of thing?
I
think 10 years ago it would have been a lot better than it is now, but the game has changed in a way that footballers just have far more power than the managers these days. You would get to the point that November, December time, he would fall out with somebody and then the whole team would take one side and another member of the team would take another side. It would just be a nightmare. Players now have the power. The manager doesn't have that power anymore. When it all goes tits up, the manager's the first one to go. So, I mean, the players have so much more power. It just wouldn't work. It's a yesterday appointment, not a today appointment.
Callum, what were you going to say on top of that? Was it something similar, or do you have something to say?
No, I just think, as we were saying, like somebody that can come in, control that dressing room. See if he was going to come in at any state, would have come in as a coach or something about a couple of years ago. Somebody that can proper grab that team and pull them go right. He's better cut out the shite. I think that's the now, as Ryan was saying, he could not cut it as a Celtic manager now. There'd be far too many players that would essentially throw the toys at the pram and that be them.
I know, as Ryan said, players have changed, the game has changed. We are in that sort of world now where players need a little bit more mollycoddling than perhaps what they used to be. And that's no me going out slagging the players or such. It's just that's the way the game has evolved. Younger players are brought into it being a lot more kind of protected now. And a lot more, I think, they work with coaches in a way that isn't maybe how Roy Keane was brought into the game. And that's just realistic. But, it was only a few years ago, Roy Keane was offered the chance to work at Celtic. He said, "No, correct me if I'm wrong." He was given that chance and he turned it down. He was ahead of Ronnie Dyle, I believe, in the list to become manager. So suddenly it's one of those ones as well, is that now he's seen the benefits, he's seen the extent of success that Celtic have went with, Brendan Rodgers, and does he feel like this isn't what, Ryan, you've touched on this before. Why should we take the chance on giving him that now? I think that, it's a gamble given it. I mean, it's a gamble for any manager. It's the same with Enzo Maresca, I suppose. But why now, after what we have succeeded, to perhaps take a step backwards to something we offered all those years ago?
It just baffles me that we would even consider this. We've seen the riches that we got under Brendan Rodgers in terms of a footballing philosophy, in terms of the way he went about his business. Like, he was the boss, but he was a great manager as well. He knew how to get the best out of his players. He knew how to pick up his players after a defeat. He wouldn't do it. Remember against Hearts when we lost our unbeaten run, and he got them all in a huddle and spoke to them. Roy Keane wouldn't speak to them for 2-3 days after the game. Probably that's just the way it would be. It's so much. It's in the past. All these stories. It's just boring to hear. Like, I wish I wasn't even talking about Roy Keane. It's just worrying that the two things have been linked together again in what seems like the 100th time. The sooner this is squashed, the better.
Yep, and finally, just on Roy Keane, before we move on to the next candidate whose name has been thrown into the ring, Callum, there's certainly one aspect of this that worryingly makes it a very real scenario for Celtic. Look, I think we'll come on to end it all off in a minute about if we think it will happen, if we think there's even a chance that there's a realm where it's possible, right? But there's one thing that scarily does make this very much a possible option. It's nothing to do with his ties. It's nothing to do with the links and what he's had with Celtic and playing for us in the past and his friendship with Dermot Desmond. It's the money-saving option. Dermot Desmond can save a pretty penny by employing Roy Keane as manager. Would it take you by surprise if he was to come out and go, do you know what? Here's your man. This is the man like this, because there's millions, I think, between him and Eddie Howe here. Eddie Howe just being the example I'd like to put forward, not saying he's going to get the job or anything, but just comparing of how there's millions to be saved there, isn't there?
Oh, that's without a doubt. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if we've seen it the old classic Celtic way. We'll go for the cheap option. It will do us better. Personally, I think we've seen it before when we had Dyer. Dyer was the cheaper option, but we've seen what happened when we went for the cheaper option. Also, the semi-final defeating them out, we splashed the cash on Rodgers. You look what happens when you spend the money, getting the better quality. It's the same as anything in life. You buy a pair of shoes at a £5, buy a pair of shoes at 50 quid. Ones at 50 quid are going to last much longer.
That's nice.
Made a better quality.
Aye. Look, realistically, let's get to the end of it here. I understand there will be people who are very keen to have Roy Keane as manager listening to this. Right? Play on words there, very keen, I understand there's people who would like that. I understand there's people who's displayed that in the comment section through, the past couple of weeks since Lennon departed the club. Roy Keane is someone who does entertain folk, and with that kind of old school mentality, you cannot hide away from the fact that excites a lot of folk too. People like the kind of style of the game of the days gone by rather than the way the game's going. That's just reality. I understand there's people who like Keane, but I think that we can all sit here and I'll come to you, right, first. Realistically, if Dermot Desmond was to make this appointment, it would be a disaster of epic proportions for me, which just makes it feel like it won't happen. And this is just something that is there in the media now to try and, Roy Keane's a name that gets shares, that gets clicks. Surely this isn't a direction we will actually go down.
I hope not. That's all hope rather than anything else. I just hope the rumour's squashed. Like Callum was saying, you get what you pay for. I mean, I would say we can't afford to have Keane in terms of the damage that he could potentially do to the team. Like, we need to go out there and get this sort of character in that can get the best of both worlds in terms of man management, but also like be able to do press conferences as well, I would say. Because he could be a disaster in a press conference. You ask him the wrong thing, he starts scowling at you. It's not a great look, because then you create headlines and it gets worse and worse and worse. I could only see it being a bad thing, honestly. I could only see this going bad, and I could see Rangers sauntering towards the title again.
Once again.
You need to bring this back.
And people, as you've already mentioned, the damage that can be done, people are forgetting. Say Roy Keane was to come in, right? And say it's one of those ones where it doesn't go well. And after a year, once again, you find yourself in the position where Roy Keane leaves the club. The damage internally that could be created there is, it could be unspeakable volumes of damage there. It could be really, really long lasting for the club, as you've touched on. Callum, once again, just to end off the Roy Keane conversation. I mean, surely you don't expect to see him in the Celtic dugout next season, eh?
Nah, with every hope and fibre in my body, I could only say that he wouldn't be there. But also, I guess for us, only time will tell and see what the board go with.
You'd think as well, if Keane was to come in, surely that would have been along with the Martin O'Neill rumour and all the rest of it back in when Lennon was first under pressure. You'd expect Keane to come into that sort of that level of management, be an assistant or something. As you said, Cam, already, to be a coach, maybe come alongside Martin O'Neill in that kind of steady the ship era. Surely that's just gone, that's floated away. Like, why would we go for it now? It baffles me to even think about it.
The ship's sunk, so there's no point.
The ship is sunk, there's no more ship to sail. We're building a new one.
Neil Lennon playing the violin as it goes down, saying this isn't an unmitigated disaster.
Look, that's actually a really nice way to kind of transition into the next portion of the show. And the next person to speak about, this is kind of like the assessing the candidates show, because I think we've got 3 different guys to speak about. So let's move on to the former Sheffield United manager, recently sacked, Chris Wilder. He was let go last week, or he resigned from his role last week after what has been a disastrous season. Like last year, Sheffield United were very good. They were on the verge of European football. I think they were probably hard done by with the project restart in England. If that never happened, then that could have been a team who would have went on to get European football. They were very, very good, and that was their first season back in the Premier League for what was it, 11, 12 years, something like that. So it was fantastic from Chris Wilder. And going into this season, the expectations were high. They wanted to follow up on what was a season no one would have ever expected. And they wanted to try and go for it again, but things didn't go that way. Money was spent on duds, and they found themselves going on a run, which was, I think, a record-breaking run, wasn't it, for the worst start in Premier League history. It took them all of 3-4 months to get their first win of the season. And now they find themselves at a position at the bottom of the Premier League where it looks as though they will be going back into the Championship. Very, very quickly, before we start talking about Chris Wilder, Neil Bloody Lennon is getting linked with that job. Paul Heckingbottom has been put in charge till the end of the season, and the rumours were, and I don't know if they will stay the same, that Neil Lennon will take charge going into next season. God bless Sheffield United fans, Cal.
I think that's all it can be said from in that fact. I mean, for me, I think Heckingbottom's bad enough for going to watch that to the end of the season, but if they need to turn around and watch a full season in the Championship alone with Neil Lennon at the helm, I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. There's maybe a person I dislike, but I wouldn't wish that upon them.
And Ryan, you must be you were the one who would really, of course, this is my own channel and I've been driving that bus, but you've been like my kind of co-pilot in the Lennon Out Express along the way here. You've been the voice on Twitter and on this podcast. Keane, all of us have, but you especially through social media have been driving that bus and piloting the plane. I mean, it must hurt to see Neil Lennon pick himself up and get himself a cushy wee job, eh?
I would say I'm surprised, but I'm not, because he just seems to weasel himself into these situations. He seems to get these jobs just out of nowhere. Well, he done it with the Celtic job, so I don't see why he can't do it anywhere else. I mean, honestly, I would hate to be a Sheffield United fan just now, because right now they're getting cuffed by Brendan Rodgers. They've got Heckingbottom at the wheel, and they've got Neil Lennon coming in potentially next season. That just sounds like an absolute disaster. Like, it sounds like Hibs fans all over.
Exactly. It does.
Doing it in reverse.
I mean, fair play to Lennon. I didn't think that he would get himself back into a job.
Oh.
So, and you know what? I'm not saying that he's got to get it. I think that conversation is obviously far from over too. They could get any manager that I think that's around that level in England. They could choose. I mean, they can offer the money. They're coming off the back of the Premier League. They'll have those parachute payments. I would be shocked if they went for Neil Lennon over some of the options that they do have. But if he does, fair play to him. Picked himself back up. He's out the unemployment line. He's into a job, and maybe it's a chance for him to kind of pick up his career. I severely doubt it. I don't see him getting Sheffield United back up into the Premier League when you look at the quality at the top of the Championship, and then the teams who will be joining him from the Premier League. I don't think it's going to work out for him, but we'll wait and see. What were you guys saying? You got something there, Ryan?
Yeah, you'll need to check that you get the right Sheffield team right this time in the week. You need to really watch out he doesn't apply for the Sheffield Wednesday job instead, although that one will probably be in the offing as well.
Exactly. Who is their manager to do? I know Pulis got sacked obviously a couple of months ago, but who ended up taking it? I can't think off the top of my head.
Gary Monk, was it? Gary Monk.
Was it Gary Monk? Was he? Oh, God knows. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Well, God bless you.
We're as bad as Lennon.
I know, exactly. I know, but geez, that was that could be a whole segment on this show alone, him mixing up the two teams. I'm glad that you actually mentioned it, because we could speak about how disengaged from the job must he have been to get those teams mixed up?
I know, it was the confidence he said it as well.
I thought it was a wind-up.
I know.
Like, I thought somebody tweeted it for a laugh, and then,
No, because somebody matched the audio. They put an audio in the tweet, and I'm not even surprised by this. Like, this,
No,
this
it didn't
doesn't
surprise me.
whatsoever.
No, I think that's kind of one of those moments as well that I think has to open up the eyes of those who didn't want rid of Lennon. Like, you hear that and you see that and you're like, well, now do you see why we all needed this to happen? We all needed the change. We wanted the change because it was quite evident throughout the entire time that he was clueless in the job role he was in. So, anyway, we'll move on to the guy who we're going to talk about now. That's Chris Wilder. Chris Wilder's another name that's been thrown into the ring of names after his departure from Sheffield United. A guy who, as we said, much success at Sheffield United, got him promoted, developed him quite well until this season. And I think might have jumped up to one of the favourites after his departure from Sheffield United too. This is one that, once again, is going to split a lot of fans. I think that more folk will lie on the no side. Callum, what is your thoughts towards Chris Wilder in a potential role at Celtic?
In terms of him alone, like, see, when I heard it first coming out, I was like, maybe I can see why they're sort of going towards that idea. But see, when a Sheffield United fans were so against it, I was surprised. Also, I don't follow him as much, so I couldn't really see what he'd done before I actually looked into it. But he'd done a hell of a lot with him, even like former players. And that, like, first one I seen was Dean Henderson. Obviously, it was Wilder that basically gave him his big crack at the Prem, taking him in on loan last season. And like he couldn't have said any more thank yous to him, couldn't have been any more positive. So I thought maybe it's something to look at, but not a Celtic point of view for me.
I think it's one of those ones that the style would be so different. How do you go from being... And this is, once again, you can flip this at anybody, because for as much as we're all kind of pro the thought of Enzo Maresca, people can say, well, what you're saying about Wilder can go to him. Like, what gives what makes the jump more acceptable for Maresca and what it is Wilder? But you look at what Wilder's kind of in that breed of managers, I think, that are forever going to be stubborn to their ways and kind of not backwards, because it's clearly worked for him to an extent, but it's sort of just outdated. And I think Wilder's in that crop of managers. You look at your Sam Allardyces, and I think you could maybe shoehorn Wilder in there. And I don't know if that's me being a bit more ignorant, but it's certainly, if you watch Sheffield United's brand of football, I don't think, Callum, it's something that you'd want at Celtic Park.
Nah, it's no. I feel it's very, not saying they're similar, but I feel it's a bit like watching Burnley. Very defensive football. They'll just play for that route one counter. Your classic FM tactic, man. No, but I feel like that's the way we'd play. We'd play very defensive. Say that happened like a game in Europe, you're playing European giants, right? Fair dues, you expect that, but you wouldn't expect that against Dundee United at home type thing.
Aye.
For me, it would be a very, as I said, Burnley-like football, just very defensive, everyone would keep flat and then just play for the counter.
Kind of 4-4-2, lump your bio up front, get the ball up to him and see what happens. Ryan, what was your thoughts when you seen the potential chance of Chris Wilder being a candidate for this job? I don't know how keen he'll be of it. I don't know if you want to stick around in England, but is he someone who tickles your taste buds?
He doesn't tickle my taste buds, no. It seems, again, it's putting two and two together. A guy's just lost his job and there's a job vacancy up here, so they're putting two and two together, making him the favourite. He was the favourite last time I checked. I checked on Sky Bet last night, and it was like something like 14 to 13 or something like that. So I don't know if there's been some money lumped on him or something. But no, it's very much, he plays very much Brexit ball, which I'm not really interested in, that sort of Burnley sort of way. If we were going to go down that route in terms of an English manager, I would much rather we sign somebody or get somebody like Dean Smith from Aston Villa. I know he probably isn't available. He'll sign a new contract extension because they've been... He's
getting touted for being the successor to Gareth Southgate if he decides to leave England.
They need to build a team around Jack Grealish.
Yep,
I know you'd like that.
Oh, aye, that tickles my taste buds.
I just think down that Brentford sort of role, he was brilliant for Brentford. They got them playing some beautiful stuff. I had Ben Rama and that. In fact, I don't even know if he was there at the time. Dean Smith was there. I don't know if maybe
he was. I think he was, but still, I think so. But nonetheless, you're touching on the right points anyway.
Aye.
And you see him doing that with Villa as well. The football they play, very nice stuff. They get the fullbacks very much involved. You look at Matty Cash and you look at Matty Targett on the left hand side. Something that Celtic could definitely replicate in a sense of getting those fullbacks to have some final product to play some nice football. But you're not going to get that with Chris Wilder.
I think Chris Wilder reminds me a wee bit of Steve Clarke. I think he would be effective, but I think he'd be uninspiring at the same time. Like, you want us to push on a wee bit, get a more expansive style of football. And yes, Wilder would be a million times better than Roy Keane, in my opinion, but we need to be pushing the boat out. We need something more exciting. We need to get the fans back on side. They need appetizers. They need to tickle our fancy to get back in the ground once we're able to do so. So they need to pull this one out the bag.
See, that's the thing. I think Chris Wilder, there's certainly worse suggestions than Chris Wilder. I think we can all agree with that. But as you said, uninspiring is a great word. I just don't see it being an appointment that would get fans queuing up to renew their season tickets. I don't think it would be. I don't see it being a manager who many folk want to work with either. Like, what players are going to go, oh, do you know what, Chris Wilder at Celtic? That seems... I certainly think if he came in, right, if Chris Wilder was given the job, I think we could go on to win the league title. We could challenge for it. I think he could play winning football, but I just don't see it being very exciting. That doesn't just mean for the 90 minutes in the park. I just feel like we're just going to be in for like a standard year of kind of emotionless winning in a sense. It's quite, I don't know how he worded it. It just seems so stationary in terms of like how you react to everything when you see his name thrown about there. There is worse, but we can do so much better. That's the reality of it. We also haven't touched on the fact his recruitment has not been spectacular. This is a guy who spent upwards of £20 million for Oliver McBurney. I think he spent tens of millions on Oliver Burke. Can't remember the exact fee. Brought in Oliver Burke as well. Spent £30-odd million on Ryan Brewster, who didn't suit his style. I think it was a very uneducated signing. Ryan Brewster's done nothing for them after spending £30 million. These are issues that Celtic need to fix. These are the ones that need to be addressed. Recruitment issues. This is something we've had to speak about heavily. So Chris Wilder, for me, doesn't fill me with confidence, Ryan, if you bring him in to be the guy who's recruiting our next batch of players.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, some of their signings have been dreadful. I think the only sort of positive one that we've had is Sonderberg, the midfielder. He looks like a great player. He'll probably move on next season to sort of Southampton or Wolves or that. But I think another problem with Wilder is that I think he came out a couple of months ago and was sort of berating the idea of a director of football approach. Now, that totally goes against everything that we're trying to do now, this sort of era that we're trying to usher ourselves into. So, I mean, it doesn't really make sense if he's going out berating a director of football that we're trying to go down that road. So, this is just two and two together again. I don't think there's any real substance to it whatsoever.
Yeah, that was going to be my next kind of question to move on to you with, Callum. I mean, once again, kind of like to Roy Keane, if this was to be the appointment, I'd be surprised, I'd be stunned, because I just don't see it being one that the board are... I know how we always bang on about decisions the board making being awful and blah, 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 but it would take some amount of naivety, and I think it'd be a rash decision if they were to go and appoint Chris Wilder. It doesn't work in any sense of the word for me.
Nah, for me, I don't see it like for both terms of the parties. For the actual club and say, as we're talking about the season book, thingy, renewals, that's not a name that gets people going, right, get the forms out there now, get it signed, type thingy. Again, I was going to touch on it, as you said before, Brian, saying Wilder could come in, you're going to get clipped for that. I can feel it already.
I know exactly.
I can feel it. If he wants to get the job.
Well, as I said, we could. I did correct myself in saying, we could challenge for it, because ultimately we should be challenging for it, no matter who's fucking in charge. But I feel like there's certainly worse names that would take my confidence levels further away from a league title. But no, it doesn't really fit the mould, and I feel like it would be quite bizarre if the board were to go down that route. We'll move on to the last name to talk about today, and the managerial candidate spectacular. We'll talk about one that, and I'll let you kick us off, Ryan, because you've been buzzing for this. Enzo Maresca. What is your call again? Pasta Pep?
Yeah, the Pasta Pep.
This is one that you've been... every day I go on social media, I go on Twitter, and I just know I'm going to see something from Ryan talking about his desire for Enzo Maresca. So Ryan, go on, mate. Enzo Maresca. Let us spell it out. Spell out your emotions, your feelings towards that link.
Do you know? At first, I didn't know who he was whatsoever. So after looking at him, looking at his background, his sort of history, the more you read into this guy, the more enthusiastic you get. He was the assistant manager at a couple of teams, including West Ham. Pep Guardiola personally chose him to be part of the EDS squad for Man City, which is a massive vote of confidence from who's probably the best manager in the world just now. In fact, he is by some distance.
Well, right, let's calm down there
Oh,
now.
yeah.
Well, let's calm down. There's a certain Hansi Flick over in Germany who's doing quite a job.
I him too.
I'll take him at Sellik if you want.
I think he's going to Germany. I think he'll be going.
You think so?
To the German job. After the Euros. But the more you read about Enzo Maresca, the more positive you get towards him. He plays this expansive football. I mean, Man City's EDS squad finished 8th last season, and now they're 8 points clear at the top this season. Now I know under 23 football isn't much to brag about or write home about, but this is the market that we're going to be in a post-Brexit world.
Yep.
We're going to be in this market for these under 23 players. Man City probably have the best academy in the UK for building young talent, even if they don't get in their team.
Yep.
Because they make up the championship, basically.
Yep.
League One, the championship, and smaller Premier League teams. So the job that he's doing at Man City is really, really impressive, and he just fits the bill. I mean, if Fergal Harkin was to come in and he brings in Enzo Maresca, I think people can get really excited by this.
Yeah, so this is what I was going to come up to you with, Callum. So this kind of fits nicely, and I'll get your opinions tied in with this towards your thoughts on Enzo Maresca, because I think we could all agree as individuals here, before this week, we probably never really heard. Well, I heard of him as a player, of course, going big in Juventus, win the UEFA Cup a couple of times in Sevilla, but in terms of coaching and such, I couldn't tell you what he was like, anything about him, and what Enzo Maresca was. You know, it was just never a thing for me to consider, and I didn't think he'd be anywhere near the Celtic job. But then you start to line up for the things and put the puzzle together. You've got a director of football who could potentially come in. The two names being linked with it the most are Fergal Harkin of Man City and Tognazzi of Juventus. Juventus being one of his former clubs and an Italian kind of counterpart. You look at the links that we've had with Manchester City in the past, the players that we have brought through from Manchester City, Patrick Roberts, as far back as Georges Samaras, Cedric Boyata, Jason Denayer. These are all names that we brought through from Manchester City. You bring in somebody like that, Callum, that fits the bill of where we're going in terms of a modern day football club, and with links to a very successful football club with a very successful youth system. It's quite a nice thought.
I know, as indeed. I think the only ones, personally for me, the only group of supporters I could see going against this might be the older ones, the ones that don't know so much about him. But simply the best thing they can do is go and read into him, like I've had to do myself. As I said, see up until maybe 2 weeks ago when the name started to chuck away, I didn't know much about him coaching wise. But as Ryan was saying there, him being in with the elite development squad at Man City and what they're doing now, that's one of the most enticing names there is that's chucked there now. If he comes in, that puts arses on seats for me.
Aye, exactly. I think one thing, Callum, that we can all agree on here is the fact that it couldn't be any further away from Neil Lennon if we tried. You're going from someone who had no clue what a tactic was, you know, flip the winger, switching wingers was the only instruction that seemed to work, to a guy who has been working alongside and has to grow, and people forget this part, he has to grow a team and grow a group of players to fit a mould that goes on to work with and coincide with Pep Guardiola. You know, this is a guy who's clearly got a bit of wit about him when it comes to tactical mindsets and all the rest of it. It couldn't be any further away from Lennon, and that's the best part about it, Calma.
It's the fact that it is a brand new, like, it's a fresh air. Can you
a breath of fresh air?
A breath of fresh air. Don't trust myself that. For the fact that he will come in, he will offer new stuff. Like the fact that he's working with such a talented group of young players down there alone. You think he could do when he comes up with players that have got a bit more experience, they know a bit more about the game. The stuff he could do for certain players like Celtic, their career could be phenomenal for me.
Yeah, and Ryan, just to touch the point that Cal brought up there, because I know you'll have plenty of opinions you want to throw out about Maresca, and I think that we're all kind of on the same side with that. But, you know, Calum's touched on the part there that maybe some of the older support won't be as keen because he's not gave himself a kind of standing as a manager in the game, perhaps as well because he's not a Sellik man. But what we've got to remember is a gamble with Paul Lambert is a gamble with Enzo Maresca. A gamble with Enzo Maresca is a gamble with John Kennedy. Any manager you put in here can succeed or fail. I don't think that we can see one name. There's only one name for me that I think can go success on, and that's Eddie Howe. I just don't see that fail, but it could. That's the thing. All these managers, they have an element of risk around them, don't they?
I would much rather take a risk. I think we're in a better position now where we don't have the sort of the pressure of 10 in a row anymore. We've got this chance. This is a new era, a new chance to try something different. Because if you look at the other end of the city, they took a risk as well. And I know their first 2 seasons under Gerrard weren't great, but do you know, as part of their 3-year objectives, they've done it.
Yep.
And that's because they stuck with it. And that's what we'll need to do. We'll need to stick with it. Like if it goes bad, we can't be expecting instant results because there's going to be a whole plethora of new players coming through the door. We need to be patient with the team. And I mean, like obviously we'd need to win something this season, but if we didn't, we can't all of a sudden turn on the team. Which is a bit difficult to say because I know we all turned on Lennon, but that was different. Obviously 10 in a row is too big. And we were all raging that he got the job in the first place. But we need to be patient. I think this would be a risk worth taking.
So to kind of quickly wrap up on Enzo Maresca and to finish up on that conversation, I think he's an appointment that us three certainly can agree on as one. And I think even if I was to get Kieran and Callum on as well, if there was all 5 of us to sit down and have this conversation, I think we'd all agree it'd be one that we're happy to take. And that's because it is just a little bit different, a little more exciting. And Callum, with a different flair coming in and Maresca and that kind of, the Italian side of things and all of that, you kind of hope that would reflect on the recruitment too. Perhaps we go away from trying to do this kind of bog standard, maybe you could say Premier League rejects for some, but a lot of the same standard signings that we make, and we're looking at the same names getting linked all the time. We could look abroad. We could perhaps he uses his know-how overseas with clubs he's worked with, like Juventus and such, and we can look over to places like the Serie A and attract players over there too.
I think with his history over there, as you're saying, it would play a good part in it. Even if I think also
Sevilla as well. I completely forgot about Sevilla. Sorry to cut you off, but keep going, Calman.
No, even like we're saying, like we see some of the players he's working with down there as well.
Aye.
There will be some of them on him that like enjoy working under him. So they might say, right, I fancy a year on loan or something.
Uh-huh.
I'm not saying we'll sign some of them. Like, the thing is, but if they were to say, right, we'll put them out a year, 2 years on loan, might see the difference that it can make because they know what he's like, so they want to play under him.
I completely forgot about the most recent example of success with a Man City link, and that's Jeremy Frimpong. Like, people can look as far as Frimpong to see what he came up here to do for a year and then got a move over to Bayer Leverkusen, one of the best teams in the Bundesliga. So there's another example. Sorry, Cam, what were you saying there, mate?
No, it's just like saying, like, again, even for you to touch on the Frimpong point, like, to bring youth players up. Because as we've said, next year we'll take the gamble if we have to. If we bring in Maresca as a gamble, so take a gamble with players. Don't be playing the has-beens as we've done this season. We've seen what it's cost us.
Yeah,
take a chance for youth players.
I think there's been a few players who've came out and said as well how good a coach and such he actually is. I've seen Robert Snodgrass was tipping him to get the job. And it just kind of reinforces that point that this is a very, and if you don't believe in it, get reading it, Ryan. This is a very believable and strong appointment for Celtic if it happens to be the option.
Absolutely. I mean, I hear people saying, "Oh, we can't afford a project," but we've got projects all over the team.
Yeah,
like all these players are projects, and the thing is, if we get a director of football in, the director of football stays, and if the manager does a good job, then he gets scouted. But the director of football stays, so the style of play stays at the same time. You just go out and scout someone different. I mean, if the manager does do well and gets scouted by somewhere else, that means you're doing a good job.
Yep.
And you can bring in somebody that might have their own ideas, but they'll stick to the fundamentals that the director of football has put into the team. So why not?
Do you think there's it's kind of spawned a question in my head right there, and I'll kind of open it up for both of you to answer, but do you think there's a lot more animosity with the Celtic support when it comes to a project in terms of the manager rather than players? Because look at all these players, Edouard project, Dembele project, Ayer project. These 3 names right away jump off as probably our best 3 players over the past 5 years, I would say. I think they are the best 3 we've had in the last 5 years. Every one of them were projects. We signed them all at the age of 18, 19 years old, and we're now selling them all on, Dembele already, and now Edouard and Ayer for a profit, and with the best wishes to them, and knowing that they will go on to play at the highest level in their careers because they're just that good. They were projects, and we were all willing and open to it, and I think even the supporters were as a whole. But then when it comes to a manager, it seems to be a lot more anxious for a lot of folk. Do you think that's something that's always got to be there, Ryan? Do you think that's an understandable element to the thinking of the Celtic support?
It's just because of the way the Ronnie Dyler saga went, I think. But at the same time, we didn't have the structure that we needed to have that sort of coach succeed in the team. if we had a director of football put in place, I guarantee you, like Ronnie Dyler would have done a better job.
Yep. It always sounds like the way he was speaking, he would have, you know?
Mm-hmm. He wasn't supposed to be the manager. He was supposed to be an assistant manager to Lennon and then an assistant manager to Keane. He was always going to get shoehorned into an appointment. It just so happens that no one else wanted the job and he was basically given the manager's job. So already from the off, that there was a problem there. But we didn't have the structure for him to succeed. And now I feel like if we got someone like him, obviously we wouldn't go back in for him. I think he's doing an all right job over in New York City. Why would he leave New York City?
Man. Why would he leave there, man? Aye.
I know. But no, I think we would have the structure now for someone like him to succeed.
Yep. I think
we were maybe 2 or 3 years too early with that sort of.
We certainly were. See, when you look back, I never really thought it at the time, but I think both of us agree now. See, looking back on the team that we had in 2015 and the setup we had in 2015, we were so far behind, and I think we were incredibly lucky that under Ronnie Dyler's reign, and this is nothing on Ronnie Dyler, but we're lucky that Rangers went in the league. We were lucky that teams weren't quite as advanced yet because we were well behind the times. Brendan Rodgers, as much as we talk about it and all the rest of it, really did. He truly took us into a new dimension. He changed everything. We were so far behind, and it's scary to think what could happen if it wasn't Brendan Rodgers who was our next manager. But very quickly, Callum, if it is, Maresca seems to be, as the days go by, becoming more realistic as who'd be the next Celtic manager. That seems to be the case. I feel like the talk gets even more stronger. The ambition in him gets a lot more. The fans like to see it a lot more. I feel like it becomes even more real every day it passes with Maresca. It's something you've got to, I think we can all agree, and we've got to urge the fans to be patient with if it is him or a similar type appointment.
I think there will be like that sort of, will be like the teething stage when he first comes in. He'll be finding his feet with the team, because as much as he could look at this team, some of the players won't be there next season if he was to come in. So it will take him a bit to find his best team, but as I said, I think the best thing he can do is all back him. If he is the man to be appointed, everybody get behind him and push through it.
Brilliant. Right, well, just very quickly before we move on to the Twitter questions post of the show, then maybe talk a little bit on what happens next week, even though I don't really want to think about next week, to be honest with you. But before we go there, the odds, I've got the updated odds here on Sky Bet. I'm going to very quickly run through them. So from favourite to least favourite, currently it stands as Chris Wilder at 11 to 10. As you said, Ryan, I think some folk have just chucked a lump of money on him and got him up there. Chris Wilder favourite at 11 to 10. John Kennedy in at 2 to 1. Roy Keane at number 3 at 9 to 1. Eddie Howe at number 4 at 12 to 1. And then after that, we've got Enzo Maresca, Frank Lampard, Paul Lambert, Rafael Benitez, Roberto Martinez, and Steve Clark. They're down there at 16 to 1, the last 4 names. It is a kind of mixed bag of dream appointments and then not so dream appointments. And I think it is just now a case of you don't know what to take from odds or such anymore. It is generally just going to be as time goes on and more sources come out with more information that look more real, then we'll be able to gauge where we are. But Enzo Maresca, I think up there at 12 to 1, I think right now could be the guy with the way things are going, but still, obviously, a lot of time to go. It's quite annoying seeing Eddie Howe slip down the list, isn't it? Down to like 12 to 1. That's like, can we get him back up at 2 to 1, please? That's what I want. Everybody knows I'm on the Howe bus. I need him here. Right, it's now time for 5 reasons Eddie Howe must be the next Celtic manager. Right, we'll very quickly talk about next week now. We won't go about it in great depth because we will be, in fact, probably doing a midweek special where we'll kind of preview the game with whoever's available and talk about what we expect to see. And then obviously I'll do my reaction, my preview video as well alongside that, my predictions. Ryan, a derby game in which Celtic now are kind of playing for pride and looking to maybe stop Rangers' unbeaten season. A week away now. John Kennedy's had a bit more time with the team. Is the confidence still at a level of which you just don't expect to be spiraling? Does that just like, don't care?
It's just a shrug of the shoulders. It's just I know a Celtic Rangers game will take care of itself in terms of the whole. Well, not sort of atmosphere, but this whole sort of aura around it. But I really couldn't care less. I would much rather just get this season over with, just so we can start fresh in front of a new era, a new manager or head coach, whatever you want to call it. I just feel like every game, we just need to go through it until the end of the season.
It'd be a nice way to recover, Callum, next week if we do go on to lose, which I'm fully accepting is probably going to happen. I'd imagine we will go on to lose the game, but it'd be a nice way to recover if we lose on the Sunday. Then Monday morning, 9 o'clock, Celtic board, bang, here's your new manager that picks us all up again, just to get pumped again next time we go to Ibrox. But I mean, I head into you in the same kind of boat as Ryan now. You just kind of want it over and done with.
I think that's been the sort of case since probably about January. Just kind of you've seen it, like we know it's going to happen. It's like rewatching an old TV show. You've seen it 4 times. You know exactly what's going to happen. You're just waiting on it pitting out. I don't hold much hopes getting into it. As you've said, if we get beat, we get beat. If we win it, gives you a bit of joy at least. But nah, not really much emotions or feelings towards it.
Fair enough. Right, Twitter questions then. We'll move on because we'll have a lot more chat about this as the week goes by. We may as well get into that to end off today's episode. A good response again. Thank you very much. If you do want to get involved with the podcast, make sure to go and follow us over on the Twitter channel at Sellik Podcast. You know how to spell it, it's on screen. And you can get you involved every week as the tweets go up. So we'll go through today's set of questions, which I put up this asking for this morning. First off, Aaron, he asked, why do you do this to yourselves? Why do we actually do it to ourselves? That's the thing. You know, what a time to actually start this show when we did. Couldn't have asked for it to be any better. The timing was just magnificent. But right, you love it, mate.
Just do it for the clout, mate.
Just do it for the clout, yeah. You're just watching the followers go up every passing day. Like,
that's that. I'm at 700 now.
Going
viral, mate.
Nearly at the big 1K. Right, okay, we'll go into the actual questions now. James, he asks, what players and staff should we be keeping and who should we be letting go during the rebuild? Now, I feel like that is a bit of a lengthy one. I've already kind of covered it, but I think when we get towards the end of the season, that's a show that we'll probably dive into doing a full episode on, like talking about who stays and why they stay and all our opinions. So it's a bit harder to go on about. Do you think Celtic will win the Scottish Cup, though? There's a question.
No.
Just no confidence at all, right?
No, I just see another horror result happening down the line. I don't know why. I just see us like it could even be against Falkirk or Arbroath. Like you could see Dick Campbell getting one up on us.
Oh mate, I would be some sight that. Yeah, Callum, it's one of those things now. The Scottish Cup, I don't think it would salvage the embarrassment we've had to go through this season. But as Ryan's already said, the confidence is kind of shattered there, isn't it? Like winning it is no longer the formality it once used to be.
It used to be you think, oh well, we went through, we've played every other team in Scotland's near enough played each other. It's a cracking thing to win it now, but see, it doesn't really add much to this season, considering how bad this season's been. It just doesn't feel like much now.
Greg, I think it's a fan account after Greg Taylor. So Greg asks, would Jordan Larson actually be a good signing, or are fans just hyping him up because of the name? Now, I'll quickly jump in with my opinion very quickly. I've kind of already breezed upon mine on Twitter. I have always hated the idea of signing Jordan Larson. I hate this whole fucking sentiment pish that we get because his second name's Larson, he's Henrik's boy, he has to play for Celtic. However, he hasn't been bad for Spartak Moscow of late. There's certainly worse options, but once again, scouting isn't a job where you go out and you pick a player because they have links with the club. Scouting has to be done thoroughly, and it has to be done in a proper manner which signs you the best players. You don't go out and sign him because it's Henrik's boy. If we sign him, we sign him, but there's a reason for signing him, and it's not because he's second name. That's my opinion. I think that we kind of maybe all share that. Ryan, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I just think it would be too much pressure on him to emulate his dad, which is absolutely impossible. Like, no player would show the loyalty that Larson did. And especially a foreign player to stay for 7 years. That's a bit unheard of.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
The guy's a god over here. And I don't want his son coming in and then suddenly feeling the pressure of the name. I know it's the same name in that, but you would want him to get the number 7 as well. That's just far too much pressure on him.
I know. It's like, you know, we talk about the King of King, Callum. It's almost like King of Kings. It's almost like bringing in the Prince of Princes. We just have that view straight away. And I think certainly a lot more, some of the more naive fans not to be offensive in any way, but you know what I mean? A lot more fans who just look at the fact it's Larson's boy and nothing else, because there is fans who'll be like that. I feel like the vast majority of us will understand that it's hard to replicate, and I think I'm speaking for 90% of fans who are saying, we all understand you cannot replicate what Henrik done, but there will be that small minority of fans who are naive enough to see, because it's Larson's boy, to expect him to be scoring hat-tricks every week, isn't there?
That's without a doubt. I think, as I was saying, it's the name that comes with it. Like, I've not seen much of him in his actual playing career, so I can't comment on Jordan. But personally, again, it's just the name you're signing him for. For me personally, because people would, like as you said, that small minority of fans would then say, "Oh, but what if he did do it?" But then again, it's just a big what if. We could bring him in, and he could end up with fucking Derek Richter, and he could end up rotten, and then people straight away are like, "Oh, he shouldn't have signed. It was because it was his dad."
Aye,
Kind of like ends up with a sort of an almost tainted view on himself.
Yep. Ryan, were you going to add something in there?
Yeah, historically it doesn't work as well, bringing in a son to a team. I seem to remember. I know Jordi Cruyff didn't play. Johan Cruyff didn't play for Man United, but he came in and he wasn't a great player for Man United. The only sort of father-son thing that you could probably say worked was Schmeichel. Kasper Schmeichel, who's done a great job.
I know off the top of my head, I'm struggling to think of very successful kind of examples of it. I think Lampard's one of them. His dad was a good player. Lampard went on to be obviously an even better player. You see now a kind of younger breed of players coming out. You've got your Justin Kluiverts, but you know, it's once again, it's a very nice idea in this utopian football world where, you know, we all the best players all breed the next batch of next players, but it doesn't work like that.
The only sort of player that you could say breaks that trend is Haaland. Really, he's a lot better than what his dad was. Obviously, one of our managerial candidates went and then ended his dad's career. So
snapped his old leg off. What a shame. Right, okay. Jamie asks, do you see him as getting 14 points and overtaking us if we just give up for the rest of the season? I think that's as outrageous as you know, the next statement I'll come out with about Celtic, you know. Me starting the season next year saying we're going to win the league again. That's just as I don't think Hibs will overtake us. But here's well, I mean, I think it's a situation at which if we do lie down and let it happen, it could make out for a good laugh. Straight faces all round.
This has been a season of utter shite. So it wouldn't surprise me if something like that happened, but at the same time, I don't see that happening.
Yeah. Okay, Rebecca asks, do you think it's Celtic going out and spending big money on first team ready players this summer to replace Eduardo Naya? Do you see Celtic doing it? Or will it be more of the low fee project signings or loan signings like in the past? Do you think this depends on whether or not we qualify for the Champions League? Cal, we'll come at you first, mate. What do you think?
For me, it's not so much depending on qualifying for Champions League. For me, it depends who's in the seat next season. Whoever's manager for next season, they could come in and say, right, I want Wolves, so we will need to find replacements for Iron Edward, as we says. But it's a case of who can we go out and sign that's first team quality that can walk straight in there and near enough replicate what they've done.
Yep. I think a good way to put it in my eyes would be like we could appoint Eddie Howe and make Europa League football. And I still think we'd attract better names if we got Chris Wilder and somehow managed to make Champions League football. I don't know if you would agree with me, but I honestly think that's how it works. I don't think the Champions League dictates a lot of it. It certainly does have an influence on who wants to come here. I'm not denying that. Of course it does. Absolutely. But I think that, as you said, the managerial name, I think will determine a lot more of that kind of process. What about you, Ryan? What's your thoughts towards how the recruitment pans out next season?
I can almost guarantee it'll be projects because it has to be. The climate that we find ourselves in terms of the Brexit situation and the pandemic situation, we don't have the money to go out and spend 9 million on Edward because he was at the end of the day, he was a project as well, even though we spent 9 million for him. And to be fair, he must have been doing extraordinary things on loan and training and that for us to spend 9 million because that's quite unheard of.
It's one of those ones that surely like Rodgers was like going to go, he's special, and he must have because now he wants him at Leicester. So
because he showed glimpses in his loan season. A lot of people were surprised that we'd spent 9 million on him, but they must have been seeing stuff in training that we can't see. He must have been consistently doing this. They must have seen that he was an absolute diamond of a player, as it's transpired that he is.
Yep.
But I do see us just going for projects because that's the market that we're in now. unfortunately, as unfortunate as it is, we cannot go out and spend 6-7 million on players anymore.
Yep.
Especially after this season. So
Yep.
we have to make them ourselves. And that's why Enzo Maresca makes sense, because we could get these under 23 players cheaper because we have that link and that relationship that could happen, or already is there with Lawwell and his son. But if Harkin was the director of football, he could bring that relationship even further, and we could get diamonds for cheap prices.
Very well put, Ryan. That was nice. That was almost Shakespearean there, mate. Well done. I appreciate that. Very good answer to the question, though, in all seriousness. And I think it's something that we'll have to wait and see with the time going on and the manager being appointed and all the rest of it. Now, I can't avoid this question because it's got the most likes out of all of them. So Matthew Duff has asked, Kiss, Marry, Avoid, Shane Duffy, Neil Lennon, and Paul the Tim. Christ almighty. I think that's I think that's one that we'll leave for the comments section to decide amongst themselves. We'll move on to Kia, who has is Roy Keane a suitable candidate to take over as Hoopy the Huddle Hound. Would you prefer that than manager, Ryan?
Yeah, I'd like to see Roy Keane in the Hoopy costume fighting Broxy Bear. I'll be honest, and I think he would win that. I think he would win that marathon race as well. You know, the race that they all do.
Yeah.
I think he would
the
win.
question
that.
is, who's in the Broxy Bear suit then? If it's Roy Keane and Hoopy the Huddle Hound,
Jimmy Bell.
Jimmy Bell and Roy Keane. Christ. Fucking hell. Right, Connor Carr asks, Cal, we'll come to you here. Do you think a great new managerial choice could convince Ayer and Edouard to stay one more season? Should we give up that pipe dream? Do you think anybody can convince them to stay?
Nah, no for me. Especially after the season it's been. I don't feel like it would need to be an extraordinary name. Somebody you would never even imagine.
Carlo Ancelotti. You know?
Exactly. And it'd be something like that. Somebody just so fucking out there that they're not even in the conversation for him to turn in and get them to stay. For me, there's nobody that gets to stay. They know they've played what they can here. They know they need to go to a level above to challenge yourself even more now.
Yep.
They've more than proven it here. So, there's nobody that keeps them here.
Ryan, you got something to add to that?
I think I've just got to the point that I want them to go, not in terms of like, I want you gone, but I want them to go for the good of their careers, because at the end of the day, they've given us 3 or 4 years of absolute brilliance. I mean, I know this season hasn't transpired the way it has, but I still want to wish them well, because they've given me some of the happiest times as a football fan, as a Celtic supporter. So, and that doesn't change in a bad season, because you think of the amount of times that Ayer's got us out of trouble, and I mean, Edouard himself.
Aye, exactly.
How many goals he's scored over the past 2-3 seasons. He's an absolute icon for people my age.
Yeah.
Like, I know people had Larson, but for me, Edouard's the closest thing to that. I'm not comparing the two, although I know a lot of people do in some ways, but he's sort of like iconic for our sort of generation.
He's right there behind us, so you know, it's just he's something special, and he's truly. I've always said that I preferred Dembele and such, but you know, those types of players, they come, and we were lucky to get 2 back to back with Dembele and Edouard, but they come around so rarely.
That's something that I want to say as well. I was thinking about it the other day. We were so unlucky not to see more of Dembele and Edouard in the same team.
I know.
So I don't know if you saw it, but in the pre-season game against Standard Liège, those Standard Liège players were going off frightened of those two playing together.
Yep.
I mean, and it was looking as if Edouard was better than Dembele at that point. Like, some of the things that he was doing on that football park in the pre-season friendly was incredible. It's just a shame that Edouard left a couple of weeks later.
Yep. But did you say Edouard left a couple of weeks later?
No,
I was just about to say something. I was like, wait, have I been in a coma?
I'm so used to saying Edouard because Dembele's been gone for years.
Exactly. I'd love to see they two playing again in their career, like I'd imagine. I mean, they could be for France. You know, that's a very realistic possibility in the future. But I mean, at club level, those two to meet up again and play again would be a joy to watch, an absolute joy to watch. So hopefully one day, but we'll see. John F. Kennedy's back as always. Big shout out to the big man GFK. He says, surely Kennedy, not talking about himself, surely Kennedy should be ruled out of consideration for the job in May. Don't care if we beat Rangers twice. Let him cut his teeth as a manager elsewhere. If he shows promise, we can always reconsider him in the future. A complete overhaul is required. And the only thing I've got to respond to that is I'm starting to think, Ryan, that this is your burner account, because this sounds like a very Ryan McGinley question to leave. I'd imagine that you're very much on board with what John has said here.
Absolutely. It's just said everything that I want, really. I just want him. I want a clean slate. Preferably, that's another thing. It's the whole Scott Brown thing.
Oh, aye.
I'd be quite happy if
Didn't even
Scott Brown
talk about
was
that.
to go at the end of the season as well. I mean, I know people say, oh, they want to keep him. He's imperative to the rebuild and that. But I want us to get a completely clean slate. I want someone else to step up into Scott Brown's shoes rather than keeping with the same old people. If he was to go to Aberdeen, I would be quite happy with that because then he can cut his teeth somewhere else. And he would go with my best wishes as well.
That's one thing I think we keep forgetting, Callum. I'll come to you here. Is the fact that if Kennedy does go, it doesn't rule him out of ever having the chance to manage this team. That's a very good point. He can be reconsidered in the future. Let him test his trade elsewhere first before taking the gamble here. Seems like a very reasonable thing to say.
Aye, I think if he was taking another job in Scotland, whether who it be, whatever opens up, if it is to be Aberdeen, then fair enough. I think that is a very good club for him to step into, to win, because they've got a good group of players up there. He's got good young players that he can take in. He can essentially apply what he had to then see how to develop. I think that's probably the best thing to do. As we said, say it comes, say it does do well. There's nothing to stop us in a couple of years down the line to say, right, why don't you fancy coming back and getting it a bash now?
Aye. Okay, we'll move on to the last kind of question now, and it's from none other than the man himself, a good friend of mine, a man who I'll give a shout out, the host of co-host of the Fit's Been Happening podcast. Make sure to check it out if you haven't already, Mr. Fatboy Beans. Fatboy Beans, he asks, well, first of all, I asked, and I responded with the meme of Piers Morgan walking away. I was like, right. But he's asked, I think it's a genuine conversation starter here. So, would you rather eat 1,000 monster pickled onion monster packets and nothing else until you finish them, or would you rather have nothing but smoothies for 6 months? I'd go with a pickled onion monster munch.
Do you know, I've actually never had a smoothie in my life before.
I'm the same as you, mate. I've never and I never will. They don't tickle my taste buds.
It sounds healthy, and healthy just doesn't go with me just now. So I'll have to be the monster munch, unfortunately.
How about you, Calma? Smoothies or the monster munch?
I think it has to be the monster munch.
Clean sheep.
Has to be.
I think that I don't know about Keane and Callum, but I can almost guarantee that Callum McKenzie would go for the smoothies. I think I can almost guarantee
I'm partly thinking the same as that.
I don't know about Keane. If I was to take a stab at it, I think he would choose the third option that's not there, and that's just to end it all where he can. I think that's what he would go for if he had the option out of it.
Kieran's would just be Lennon out.
A big old packet of Lennon out. And then I responded with the reverse image of Piers Morgan walking back in as Beans dropped in an actual question for us to end off today's show. What can Celtic do to retain the youth players and integrate them into the team? I.e. Moko, a.k.a. Karamoko, a.k.a. Karamoko Dembele. What can they do? At this point, it is kind of now, surely that conversation only begins when new coaches come in.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need a coach that is willing to play young players and not go with the tried and tested 24, 25-year-olds every week.
Yep.
I mean, I don't know if you saw it yesterday, but Borussia Dortmund brought on Mukoko.
Oh, and they got a goal, man.
He scored against Hertha Berlin, your football manager team.
I know, that's like my love against my kind of love.
But, that could have easily been Karamoko Dembele this season.
Yep.
Because the two are very similar in sort of stature and their style of play. And it's quite annoying that we've not really had the chance. I think maybe Karamoko's size goes against him, because I don't think he's maybe developed as they'd have hoped, because he is quite small for his age.
Yeah.
It would have been good for a coach to like show some faith in him and not shoehorn him in when we needed players, when we needed bodies on the park, like the Dubai thing happened, because we were essentially forced to play the young players and they wouldn't have had a chance any other way. Like, that was Cameron Harper's only appearance for Celtic.
Aye, now he's gone.
Yep.
It is one of those ones, giving those guys a chance, I think, comes in, and Ryan's already touched it, kind of just comes in with a kind of culture change at the club where these guys are expecting to get chances. Even when you look at Dortmund, that's why, even to be a bit adventurous and say Celtic should perhaps look at the availability of Lucien Favre, who just left Dortmund. You know, people like that, these are the kind of managers who will give young players a chance. That's what you need before that conversation starts, isn't it?
I think even for, as I say, Karamoko for this season, like, how long has James Forrest been out for?
Mm-hmm.
See, give him a couple of games. We don't have another right winger or right midfielder there. So what have we done? We've took Ryan Christie, a centre attacking mid, and put, right, we'll pop him at right. he's not playing it right, he's playing up front for some reason, which still baffles me.
Yep.
So why not give him a chance? As I said with the full Dubai situation, that was a perfect time to say, right, bring a couple of them in, play them out wide, get the wingers back in, something we've lacked massively this season.
Oh.
The thing that annoys me as well is that these players' values diminish as well over time. And our model was just totally overlooked this season. Why did we go against our model? I know it was the 10 in a row season, but we just totally went against our model in terms of the transfer signings. We didn't sign projects apart from Turnbull, but he was already then. He already had the quality to go in the team. But if you look at our other signings, they're all just signings for this season, maybe apart from Barkas, maybe, but he was 26, 27 anyway. We went against our model when we could have got players like Mark McKenzie who could have been developed over a couple of years and then sold on for a profit. I just don't get why we just abandoned it this season. It doesn't make sense to me at all.
No, does not. A couple of more questions he has to try. We'll try and shoehorn in very quickly. Would you give Hendry another shot? There has been obviously a lot of talk about Jack Hendry. One thing that we've not actually spoke about here is the fact that apparently Aston Villa are willing to pay £10 million. I don't know what player they've been watching. It kind of annoys me. I must admit, I'm never going to get on that. I'm just not going to get on that Jack Hendry bus. I never will. I simply can't until I see evidence at a level that is equivalent to Celtic that he can start for us. I'll never be giving him a chance. I just won't be, and people might hate me for it, and people might not agree. But I've just got this stubborn image in my head of Jack Hendry being Jack Hendry, and I don't know. For me, he doesn't get a chance. I don't know about you two.
See, to be fair, Shane Duffy's made more mistakes in a couple of months than Jack Hendry did in his career. Yeah. I think it was more. I mean, Brendan Rodgers really wanted him. Like he went all out to get him as this sort of like Scottish John Stones. I know they look quite similar, but I mean,
that's you revealing your type there, Ryan.
That's that. I love John Stones. What a player. But no, I mean, why not? Why not give him a chance? Maybe even in pre-season, but.
I think that I would need
things have happened.
I would need to be convinced. I would have to be really convinced. And that's the thing. To be convinced, I need to give him a chance, don't I? But I don't know. I just don't buy this whole, he's revolutionised himself and all that over in Belgium playing for Ostend when you see the quote. I mean,
it's not a great standard.
No, it's not. Rangers scored, 10 goals into them over the course of 2 legs? No, the same team, but the second best team in Belgium. Rangers scored 10 goals. What would have happened if they went up against Jack Hendry? And I know that's a kind of unfair comparison to give because that's not exactly Hendry's fault that they've conceded 10 goals. But I don't know. I just find it hard to buy it. I don't know what it is.
I think I would say he could be a sort of late bloomer that gets into his career in the next couple of years. I would make the example of the Wolves centre-half, Max Kielman, who was a futsal player who's 24, 25 now. And he's now starting to get games for Wolves. But it was only because he was a late bloomer that was worked on over a couple of years. But I mean, that's a bit. I don't know. It's a bit of one here.
Got to judge when the time comes, if it does come for him, I suppose. Cal, what about you? What's your thoughts on Hendry and this kind of loan that he's had to extend over the past year? Does that kind of is it kind of warm duty idea of him come back into the team?
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to giving him a chance. He's out. He's played first team football. He's got more experience under his belt now. We've done it with Stephen Welsh this season. He just got chucked right into the team.
I think actually
he's developed on a bit.
Yeah,
he's not. I'm not saying he's like the finished article. He's brilliant. He could replace Iron. Nothing like that at all. But Jack Hendry's out. Worked his trade. Played first team football. So at least he can come back. He's got experience under his belt now.
That kind of links into what I was going to say to kind of finish it off. I feel bad for Jack Hendry in the sense that I don't feel like he's not going to get that opportunity, I think, that Stephen Welsh did. Stephen Welsh was here at the right place at the right time for us having Shane Duffy being as bad as he was and being so thin in the ground. Whereas next year, for me, Celtic have to prioritise signing good enough centre-halves rather than giving that chance to Jack Hendry. If Jack Hendry was here this season, who knows? Maybe he would have got that chance. Maybe he would have took that chance. But I would sign centre-halves over playing Hendry every time next season that we can. That's the route I'd go down. So it just kind of depends on what happens and where we find ourselves in terms of squad depth. And that about does it. I did have a question about Mr. Diego Martinez of Granada, who once again have conquered the odds and such and went through to the next round of the Europa League, and they're doing well. He's been championing Diego Martinez to be next Celtic manager, but I kind of ran out of time for today, so I'm afraid we won't get into it. We've got 3 minutes left in the Zoom call here, which means we have to get round to wrapping things up very quickly before we do. Ryan, Cal, or something, Ryan, have you got anything you'd like to throw in to end off your appearance on today's show?
No, just thanks for having me. Thanks for getting me back on the podcast. It's been good fun talking about Enzo Maresca and my love for Enzo Maresca.
Pasta Pep.
Pasta Pep.
Pasta Pep.
All aboard the Enzo Express.
That's it. Enzo Amore, yeah. What was it? He said again, I'm a bona fide G and a certified stud. Was that it?
Certified.
That's the other way about. I got the wrong way about. Cal, you yourself, you got anything you'd like to chip in before we end off the show?
Nah, just the very same. It's good to be back on. Good to be spouting my usual nonsense.
Good to be starting off the show talking about fucking chlamydia and then ending the show talking about Jack Hendry.
And out in my love for John Stones in the middle of it.
Exactly. It's been a real,
I'm cancelled. I'm going to be cancelled by the end of this podcast.
It's a character building episode, you see. That's all it was. Lads, thanks very much for coming on. I appreciate the kind words at the end of the show there. Look, thank you everybody who's been listening. If you've been on Spotify, thank you if you've been watching on YouTube as well. Make sure to share the podcast out, try to grow the audience as best we can. Ultimately, the aim is to be one of, if not the top Celtic podcast out there. So every share is appreciated. It's a very good world, this Celtic podcasting world. Good guys everywhere. But thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Callum, for being on with me today. And I think that about does it. Like and subscribe, follow on Spotify. See you next time.